Ambassador, nice to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Greta. It's been a long time.
It has. Welcome back to Washington.
Thank you, thank you. I'm glad to be in this position. I'm not sure I'm glad to be back because I love the planes, but glad to be here.
All right, so tell me, what is this job?
It's about religious freedom, and it's about taking, I think, the most important topic in the world and activating it and making it come to life for people. Too many people live in a repressive religious regime where they can't practice their faith the way they want to. We believe as Americans that this is a God-given right and you're entitled to it wherever you are in the world, and we're activating that.
So what do you do? I mean, how do you go about doing that?
You know, it's kind of, there's granular and then there's global. Really granular, we just got a guy out of prison that was a Vietnamese pastor. It's global in that we're pushing countries to open up their policies for religious freedom. And it's kind of soup to nuts between that, but that's really what the office does on a daily basis, those two things.
Every faith? I mean, when we talk about religious
every
freedom?
faith or no faith at all. The American Humanist Association comes to the roundtables that I have, and they're saying, look, we want to be free to not believe anything. And you're going, you know, that's your God-given right. That's the way, in my estimation, the God created the world. You're to be free. You can free to choose to do with your own soul or nothing at all.
How do you reconcile with certain situations, like take a country like Saudi Arabia, which you got to be a Muslim, and what if we don't agree? The United States, we say you got to have freedom to choose. It shouldn't just be, you shouldn't have a religion imposed upon you. What do we do?
Well, we put them on a special watch list, or we put them on a country of particular concern. We highlight what policies they're doing that pull away from that. We push them as hard as we possibly can. Now, there's a natural pushback that takes place in the system because our embassy in Saudi Arabia and other places say, oh, wait a minute. We got other equities that we're interested in here. But we push that you should provide for religious freedom in your country, and that applies to friend and foe alike.
But in the meantime, we also need their help in the world, and we help them in the world. So when we have a real conflict with the country, just generically, with their repression of religion or their intolerance of it, how do you sort of reconcile that with trying to get things done in terms of religious freedom, yet we don't want to step on toes because we need their help another way?
Well, I mean, how do you do it with a friend? I mean, you know, your friends, you got friends and you say, hey, but I don't like you doing this, but you're my friend. Well, you stay being their friend, but you really focus them and say, look, this is not right, and here's why it's not right. And I think people and countries act in their own self-interest. So I think you have to go to the country and say, this is in your best interest to be religiously free. And we now have the studies that this will reduce terrorism in your nation if you allow religious freedom, and it's common sense discussion as well. If I tell you, I am not going to let you practice your faith, I'm not going to let you do it. I want to force you to know. What will you do? For a lot of people that are religiously motivated, they're going to fight you. And they're going to find some way to fight you. Whereas if I invite you into the society and say, bring your ideas to the public square, they're going to participate in the process. And so I think we take those sorts of ideas to people, countries like Saudi Arabia, and say, this is for your good to do this.
Is there going to, I know you're new in the job, is there some sort of anticipated pushback, for instance, where we're trying to tell another country that freedom of religion is very important, that it's a basic human right? Is there some sort of pushback where they say, well, what about your country? You've got this, what's been characterized as a Muslim travel ban. I mean, do you expect to get pushback that we need to practice more what we preach, so to speak?
Absolutely. I mean, that's a natural debate that takes place every day. And say, okay, bring your ideas to me. Let's look at it. Here's why we did this. Now tell me why you don't let people practice your faith, or why do you have them in jail, or why do you kill them if they have an anti-conversion law? Why is that right? And give me your rationale for doing that. How's the U.S. doing? I mean, obviously we don't put people to death for the religion, but there is some mocking of religion. We've had the situation where recently the vice president was mocked by a television show for his religion. We've got, I don't think that the Mormon Church is pleased with the Book of Mormon, which mocks their religion. What about here in the United States? How are we doing? And that's something this office doesn't deal with intentionally. I helped write the law that created this office. And what we try to do is get something that could have bipartisan support. So the promotion in general for religious freedom internationally is something that both parties could agree with.
So it doesn't. So your influence is not going to be in the United States. It's not domestic.
This office is intentionally, by law, not focused on domestic religious freedom issues, even though you could raise 100 of them. And in my prior life, in former positions, I did. But this is about international religious freedom.
What are you looking forward to doing in this job? What sort of, when you accepted the nomination, what did you think, like, this is something I'd really like to do? What part of it?
Saving lives. I used to do this work when I was in the Senate, and we'd advocate for people that were in jail, and once in a while you could get somebody out of jail and out of country and literally save their life, and it was a great day. I would also, on a global basis, really like to see the gates fly open for religious freedom around the world. I so fundamentally believe that this is one of those rights that brings forth a number of other human rights. And I do think we're at a moment where you could see that start to take place. You've got administration interested in it. You've got now the studies that show that this is the right way to go. You've got I think an alignment, and a lot of people in Congress interested in this, that you really could see this religious freedom blossom around the world.
What do we do about the situation where we're at war with ISIS, and they persecute the Yazidis? And so what do we do? I mean, the Yazidis, we need to protect them from the persecution, but they're displaced from their property. I mean, you have the intersection sort of of the lofty goal of wanting to protect people's life, liberty, practice religion, but then we have situations where we have war.
It's a tough one, and I plan to go there. I've got a trip planned soon to go into that region in northern Iraq where the Yazidis and the Christians were persecuted, where there was a genocide against them that took place. And right now the focus is how do we rebuild the area and have it secure enough that the Yazidis and the Christians can move back in. The security is the first. And then rebuilding and demining the area is going to be a key part of it. But there's quite a focus on that right now.
It's just unbelievable. I was in that Iraqi area and saw what was being done to the Christians and the Yazidis near Mosul. And it's just devastating. I mean, we have no concept here in the United States of how terrible it was for those people, or it is for them.
I don't know if you've seen the movie 12 Strong. It was about the 12 first guys into Afghanistan. The lead guy was a Kansan. Going into that, and has to ride horseback into battle, and it's Hollywood. And he says his kids really think he's cool now because he was played by Thor in the movie, so being cool to your kids. But there's a scene in there about religious persecution when you have a real fundamentalist, militarized view of the religion he was practicing, and killing the father for allowing the children to be educated, allowing the female children to be educated. And you hear the stories from the Yazidis and the Christians and the selling of women as property, and just going, that's just, at your heart level, that is just ringing to you wrong as you hear it and you see it.
Well, you see it with Boko Haram in Africa, where the little girls were kidnapped, and this was about a couple of years ago, and over 200, and the world was scandalized, as they should be, and an effort to get them back, but then it sort of just fades. People forget about it.
I don't know
and there's been another recent kidnapping, but we sometimes, even in the media, we sometimes forget things.
Yeah, I suppose, but I don't think they do. Like in me taking this job, I left the governorship of Kansas the last year to take this job. I had a number of Kansans saying, I'm really happy you're doing this. And they didn't even know the office existed, some of them. But they had read in their church bulletins or things about what had happened to Boko Haram. They remember the people beheaded on the seashore by ISIS. They remembered that image is burned in their head, and they're going, if the United States can do something against this and for religious freedom, I'm for it, and I want us to do it.
Well, what do we do, though, about the situation where you take the burqa, where you can only see the woman's eyes, and I think to myself, boy, I feel terrible for those women. But what do we do if the women want to practice that religion?
They're free to do it.
Free to do it. But how do we know? We've got a situation where they can't get educated in some parts of the world because of their religion.
Well, I mean, to me, we ought to, and we do as a government, push for just a basic right to be able to learn and to be able to prosper yourself. Countries make their own decisions about things, but I mean, to me, a freedom of religion is something that really will help spawn the rest of these rights as well, coming out of it.
This law is relatively new. You helped pass it back in the 90s. It's relatively new now to me. Why? What provoked it?
We didn't think State Department was doing anything dealing with religion.
Uh-oh, and then and here you are.
Yeah, well, but here I am in the belly of the beast. But we didn't, and at that time, and I remember Madeleine Albright coming to meet with me afterwards when I was in the Senate and saying, why are you so interested in these things? And I said to her, well, it's kind of like Paul said. I said, woe to me if I don't do something. When you have the ability and you see these problems existing all over the world, and the problems of religious persecution haven't gone down since '98. They've gone up, and they've even gotten more violent since that period of time as you get more and more interaction of faith communities and minority faith communities in countries and people wanting to be free. So it's like the Congress really was the early warning system to State Department, who just didn't want to deal with religion, saying that just gets in the way of good policy, religion does, to where now they're recognizing this drives policy because it drives cultures. Cultures determine policy. And so you really want to drive this issue of being free because it will drive a whole bunch of better policies in places.
Well, you actually see that, I think, in the Myanmar situation, the Rohingya. Here you've got the Buddhists and the Myanmar military who have done ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya Muslims, pushed about 680,000 out of there to Bangladesh.
It's religious cleansing.
But it's religious, but it's religious and ethnic.
It is.
And so what is sort of, do we go back to imposing sanctions on Myanmar? Is that, I mean, how do we stop that?
Well, I mean, it's hard, but you have to start by calling it what it is. I mean, this is religious cleansing. I mean, it would not be happening were these people not Muslim. If they were Buddhist, in all likelihood, this would not be happening today. And I think you start by calling it out for what it is. And they may say, well, it's not really, or they don't deserve to be here, or this or that. I said, well, come on, guys, seriously? Would you be doing this to them if they were Buddhist? Would you? And if they can't answer that one straight, then I think you start working, obviously, with education, with calling it out around the world. You move forward with the sanctions on people, and you put pressure on saying, we're not going to stand for this. And we don't care what religion it is. We're not going to stand for it. And we're going to call it out, and we're going to speak about it, and we're going to take actions.
Do you see the administration interested in this Rohingya crisis? I mean, it's so far across the world. I mean, Secretary Tillerson was one of the first to say ethnic cleansing. I know Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, has likewise done that. But, you know, what is the U.S. likely to impose sanctions on Myanmar? Do you hear any discussion of that?
Oh, I think you're likely to see a lot of actions move forward. You know, it's a tough one in the sense that...
I mean, just to interrupt, it's also bipartisan in that Senator Dick Durbin, a Democrat, is very interested in this topic.
Yeah. A senator from Oregon, very interested in this topic. A number of people are. But I think you're going to see actions taking place on this one. But I think the world is also, and the United States it's a complex tugging back and forth because you've had this military junta in the place, but then you have Aung San Suu Kyi that moves in and, you know, has been this breath of fresh air. But then you have this move, and you're going, well, wait a minute, we don't want to hurt her and the move away from a military dictatorship, but you can't do this. This is religious cleansing. So I think that gets to be the tension of what you end up doing, but this is such a clear case.
You know, it's interesting is that, as you know, this country is not perfect. No country is perfect, but boy, I don't know if people realize when it comes to things like freedom of religion, how much luckier Americans are, or people visiting our country, than some of these other places, whether it's China or Myanmar or parts of the Middle East. They have no idea.
The public announcement came out of me getting this position. I was at Mass and took communion at noon, and I was going to the press conference. And a man from Congo stopped me as I was leaving, and he was a asylee in the United States from Congo and found his way to Kansas. And don't ask me how, but he's a nice young man. And he was saying, I'm really glad you're doing this. He had a friend of his that was in one of the boats trying to get across the Mediterranean, and as they were finishing up the trip, they were asking him if he was a Christian, and he said, yeah, and they threw him out of the boat because the dominant religion in that boat was not Christian, and he died. These examples happen all the time, and they're deadly, and that's why it's just, I'm just honored to be in the job, and I hope I can help save some lives.
Ambassador, nice to see you, sir.
Good to see you again, Greta.